Welcome back to another review. Today we're going to talk about The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. I did receive a free ARC of this from NetGalley for an honest review, so let's get into it like I always do at the start of my reviews. What are my general thoughts and experiences without talking about synopsis, since I know some people are like me and like the art of discovery. This was a fun time for me. Like, my subjective experiences, I had a blast. I do think there were some things at the end that prevented it from being the full new favorite 5-star experience, but I consistently wanted to pick this book up when I wasn't reading it. If you saw my weekly check-in for the week that I read this book, I was so excited. I was so engrossed in this story. It was everything I wanted an adventure fantasy book to be. So that's like my general thoughts. So if you're someone who likes the art of discovery and doesn't want to know anything else, you can leave, because now I'm going to talk briefly about the synopsis and then in the spoiler-free ways talk about the elements I thought were done really well in this book and maybe some that might be a problem for you depending on what you do and don't like in your fantasy books. So the synopsis, briefly, we have Ren. She grew up as a street rat as part of a knot, and when we start this story, she's trying to pull off a con to join one of the higher society families of this area. And that's basically where we start. She wants to pull this con. She wants to have money for the rest of her life. She wants to beat the system that caused her to be poor in the first place. Pretty standard start, right? Well, I loved this world and the approach to that kind of classic narrative so much. And I think one of the reasons is that I was so engaged while I was reading it. I normally don't have a very good attention span. I do read a lot, but normally in 20 to 30 minute increments. I'm really bad at reading for like hours at a time. I was reading this book for hours at a time because I was so engaged. And I think part of that is that I was connecting with this political intrigue plot, trying to figure out the maneuvering she had to do to make sure the con stayed good and could get in the good graces of this family, with the complexities of the unintentional relationships and friendships that form as she goes through that plan. I was just really invested in it. And I know a lot of people will probably actually find the first half of this book kind of slow-paced. But for me, I literally couldn't put it down. I think the first half was probably my favorite part of the book. I loved slowly seeing this world through Ren's and our many other point of views eyes, because this is a multiple perspective book, and I just really liked it. I thought that because the politics were grounded in something that I think could be seen as relatable, it was really engaging to me. I think sometimes politics, I'm so far removed from it that I can't figure out why people would do certain things, but here it was always really clear to me, and I loved the maneuverings and all the behind the scenes stuff, because you didn't have to follow the nitty-gritty details. You just got the overall surface of the politics, and most of the slow moments are focused on character relationships. And if I'm going to be in a slow-paced setting, those are my favorite things. I love watching characters interact and develop in their relationships. I don't know if I really saw a lot of character development in this book, but I saw relationship development, and that is as part of why I read stories. And if you know me as a reader, I like to be engaged and I like to be connected, and part of my connectivity to a work is, do I have buy-in to caring about these characters? And I think that's where this book excelled, and part of that was because we had a slower to medium-paced beginning where I really got to understand Ren and Tess and Vargo and Serato. Like, we have so many point of view characters, but because we get all that page time, I didn't feel like anyone didn't get enough screen time for me to feel buy-in into their agenda, into their purpose for being there. And I think that's part of why I really loved it and connected to it. And like I say in all reviews, I can't predict if you will like these characters. What I will say is, Ren could have easily been the tropey con artist character. I read her many times, but for some reason, I didn't find her tropey to the point where, like, oh, I can't believe you are a unique person. Like, there were things about her past and her character that I did find that I was connecting to. But I think part of the strengths was I had a lot of other characters I also really cared about, one of them being Vargo. Oh boy, I really love Vargo. And if you read the book, well, when you read the book, you're gonna know why. And part of it is everyone has their own agendas. They are making decisions because they have their own agency and their own plans, and it all feels like it makes sense. I never felt someone was doing something just for the sake of the narrative, which is one of my least favorite things. When I'm reading a book, I don't want someone to be doing something and it not make sense to them. They can make dumb mistakes, that's totally allowed, but it has to be within the confines of how intelligent I think they are, or decisions they would make based off emotions. And I felt like all of that was in here. Another reason I found this incredibly engaging was there's this intrigue and mystery the whole story. And there's kind of like multiple threads. There is this main thread that you don't really see until you're at the end of the story, which is one of my favorite things, when you're at the end of the story and you can kind of see the whole picture of how things came to this point, and you can feel really satisfied about it. But the whole time, there is this mysterious masked avenger called the Rook, and the whole time, I just want to figure out who the Rook is. And like, I'm not going to say how that panned out for me, but that question was so fun to have, and I can't wait to reread this book, because obviously I know how things happen, and I'm very excited to reread it with the knowledge that I have to see what I gain from that type of reread. But just all these questions, these really compelling relationships, this political landscape that felt really grounded and like relatable, not relatable, but reasonable, acceptable, were just things that had me keep wanting to pick up this book and read it. I'm very excited for the sequel. And yeah, so that's like kind of the gushing part of me. These are reasons why for me as a fantasy reader, these things were working. Reasons why I think it might not work for some people. It is slow to medium paced at the beginning. I do think the pacing picks up dramatically at the end, which actually for me was kind of like a downside. I think I've learned this about myself as a reader lately, is I don't mind sped up endings. I think they are traditionally very fun, especially like in a movie. But for some reason, my headspace the last 6 to 8 months has really loved drawn out conclusions, kind of like, I don't know how to say it, but like I had this complaint in Black Sun too, where it's like the ending wasn't like too fast, but because it was just all so fast-paced, I lost the things that I was loving, such as the character interactive moments and the relationships. Like, we had to take a back seat from that so that the things that were happening could happen. So I still really enjoyed it, but I think the ending is what prevented it from being that full 5-star experience, because I wasn't getting to focus on the things that I was loving about the story. Now, also, for some reason, this is almost a 700-page book, and it is only 24 chapters. So if you do a little calculator math, that means these chapters are very long, which is usually a downside to me. I don't like when chapters are over 20 pages because I do like to read multiple chapters in a sitting. So if I can only read a chapter at a time, I don't feel like I'm being productive. This didn't happen to be a con for me for this book, but I do have a lot of friends who, when they were reading their arcs, were just like, man, this feels so long. And I think part of that is that there are long chapters, and if you're not feeling how the world building is being introduced with this political intrigue, that might be uninteresting to you. So these might be things that might not mesh with what you want in fantasy. It is a long story, but I do think, like, yes, you could argue it could be 100 pages less, but honestly, then I think I wouldn't have liked it as much. I loved the extra time I got to spend in this world. I think another thing that's going to be a little bit divisive is the world building, how it's executed, what's included. I saw this as a very soft to medium magic system, and what I mean is, like, there's hard magic, which is like Brandon Sanderson, Brent Weeks, strict rules that you must follow. And I mean, this magic system might have strict rules, but it reminded me more of a Jemison-esque magic system where, like, there are structure and rules, but I don't know them all, so it can still do kind of lots of really cool things without much explanation. And it's based off like dream magic and pattern reading with like a tarot card thing, and there's like inscription writing, kind of like the Aeons and Elantris, or the Scribes and Foundry side. Like, all of this kind of meshes together. There are deities that are involved. And I really liked it, and I liked that you really only got to understand certain bits of it when you were with a character who would understand it, because these are things that the common person doesn't really have a grasp on. They know this type of magic makes it so that the water works, or, you know, they know the functionality of it, but they don't know the like nitty-gritty engineering details, which I think makes sense when magic is so ingrained into how your world functions. It also does not take a front seat in the story till about, I want to say, halfway through. Before that, you're still just like learning this world, the politics of the world, which it is Venetian based, and a lot of it's going to be based in what you see. It's very visual, especially initially with the clothing, which I didn't think I would like because I'm not a very visual reader, but I loved it. It's very ballroom political drama-esque, so I loved seeing these rooms and the clothing and the implications behind the clothing and the different architecture based off different conquests, because you have this whole place that was conquered by another people and these two people trying to function, and there's obviously corruption, and there's obviously unequal distribution of wealth, and there's prejudice, and all of this exists here in a very, I feel like for me, I was able to put a lot of what I know about how these situations play out into the story, and the story was verifying that to me. And it made it easier to learn about this completely new world. Even if it had kind of a complex vocabulary, there are definitely lots of new terms introduced. There is a glossary. I did not use it because I do think the context clues were good enough. But I'm a pretty well-read fantasy reader. I'm very used to, oh, I don't know that term, and I'm just gonna keep going until it matters enough that I have to really figure it out. Those don't normally hold me back. But if you're someone who really doesn't like to have a bunch of terms not explained really well, or maybe feels like it's superficial that we have all of these terminology, then I could see it like maybe being like overwhelming and feeling like too much, especially since I do feel at this core, this is mostly just a really fun fantasy story. I don't think it's really meant to be anything deep. For me, it was just like such a fun, engaging ride. And I thought that it was really well constructed and really fun, and I love these characters. I mean, the reasons I read fantasy are largely in this book. I had such a great time. Another aspect of the world building that I do not want to overlook is how incredibly LGBTQ friendly it is. Like, this is a world where it does not matter if you are gay, straight, bi, trans. Like, these are all very, very normal in this world. I guess this is maybe a slight spoiler if you really care, but to my knowledge right now, we don't really have there's like one main character who is LGBTQ, but like the entire world is just filled with it. Several supporting characters are. It's just so extremely inclusive in terms of that. And I was geeking out about that with my friend Judith because it was just so nice. And it's incorporated in such little ways that I loved. For example, like I said, ballroom politics. There's ballroom dancing, which I used to be a ballroom dancer, so loved it. But that like gender roles that we have in our ballroom dances of the lead should be male and the female should be the follower, which is fine, but it's like, that doesn't always work out. Like sometimes the female needs to be the lead when you're doing ballroom competitions. And in this world, that wasn't like the exception or the rule. It was just, you led if you wanted to lead and you followed if you wanted to follow, and it was beautiful. And I loved it. So, and the last thing I'll leave you with is, I believe, my hypothesis, I could be wrong, and I'm so sorry if I lead you astray with this, but I believe that if you like the Founders Trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett, and if you like the Davabad Trilogy by S.H. Chakravorty, you will like this book. That's what I believe. It's multi-point of view, has kind of the action of the Founders Trilogy, but the political relationship intrigue of Davabad. I mean, it's very relatable to the Davabad Trilogy, especially with the whole class system having this struggle. I just had such a fun time with this story, and hopefully this helps you determine if you will have a fun time with it. I hope you do. I hope you have a fun time with every book you pick up. Otherwise, if you made it this far, put a mask as the emoji in the description below if you just want me to know you're here. If you have any questions or thoughts, leave those down below. If you leave any spoiler thoughts, please mark them as spoilers. And do you think you'll pick this book up? I do think, I guess I didn't mention this, that this is a complete story. It's the start of a series, but it's a complete thought for what it puts on the page with a lot of, I can see where next books are going. Like, that's the feeling I got finishing this. I didn't get the, that's a cliffhanger, where's the next book feeling. I got a, oh man, I'm excited to see now what we do in the next story now that this plot arc has been wrapped up. That's how I felt at the end of this one. But otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.